The shocking arrival. The year was 3000, and the galaxy had long been quiet. For centuries, peace had reigned, or so the citizens of the galaxy believed. There were rumors of war and rebellion, but nothing concrete. The universe had grown complacent, and everything seemed routine. Then, everything changed. A massive ship appeared in the sky above the small, peaceful planet of Eldora. Its silhouette was unlike anything the residents had ever seen. The ship's sleek metallic surface glinted in the light of Eldora's twin suns, casting long shadows over the surface. The air was still, and an eerie quiet settled over the land as the ship descended slowly toward the surface. The people of Eldora could only stare in disbelief. Who would dare visit their quiet planet? Inside the ship, a group of cadets from the legendary Deathworlder's military academy prepared for their first real mission. They were young, only just beginning their journey as soldiers, but each had already been trained in the brutal ways of their homeworlds. Deathworlders were known across the galaxy for their fierce survival instincts and unmatched strength. They had survived the harshest planets, with environments that could kill the unprepared in an instant. Their training was brutal and unforgiving, meant to forge warriors from the raw stuff of survival. But now, these cadets were on a peaceful planet, far from the chaos they had trained for. They were about to encounter something far different from what they had known. The ship's landing was flawless. The cadets, dressed in their standard-issue combat armor, stepped out one by one onto the lush soil of Eldora. They were greeted by a group of local officials, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. The planet was known for its peaceful ways, and these visitors from a legendary, brutal species were a mystery. The cadets, standing tall and silent, observed the planet's residents. Eldora was beautiful, with vast green fields stretching as far as the eye could see, and towering trees that glowed faintly with the planet's natural energy. The air was crisp and smelled of fresh flowers, a stark contrast to the smoky, polluted air of their homeworlds. For a moment, the cadets stood still, almost uncertain, as the weight of their mission settled upon them. They had been sent here, not by choice, but because they had been chosen. Their mission was clear: integrate, observe, and break the silence that had lasted for over 100 years. But as they looked around, the peace of Eldora felt off. There was something unsettling about it, a tension in the air that no one could put their finger on. As they gathered their belongings and prepared to meet the leaders of Eldora, the cadets were handed a message from their commanding officer. It was simple and direct. Stay vigilant. Trust no one. Our enemies are closer than we realize. The cadets exchanged glances, unsure of what to make of the message. They had heard rumors of sabotage and betrayal, but they hadn't expected anything this early in their mission. Eldora had no known enemies. Its people had lived in peace for centuries. Yet, as they looked into the eyes of the Eldoran officials, a cold feeling crept into their hearts. The people here smiled, but their eyes seemed to betray a hidden fear. They didn't trust the cadets, not fully, and the cadets could sense it. This mission was not going to be as simple as it seemed. Suddenly, a loud noise rang through the air, the sound of alarms blaring across the city. The cadets snapped to attention, their instincts kicking in. The Eldoran officials hurriedly gestured for them to follow, their faces pale with fear. The calm of the planet shattered in an instant. Something was wrong, very wrong. The cadets moved swiftly, their bodies trained for swift action. They followed the Eldorans to a large building at the center of the city, where a group of the planet's military leaders had gathered. Inside, the walls were lined with holographic screens displaying various data feeds. On each screen, the same message flashed: increased threat detected. Alert level. What's going on? One of the cadets asked, his voice low and tense. We don't know. An Eldoran official replied, his hands trembling. Something is happening outside our atmosphere. Ships. They've appeared. Ships we don't recognize. The cadets exchanged a quick glance. They had trained for many different scenarios, but nothing like this. They had never been prepared for a peaceful planet to be caught in the crossfire of an unknown threat. Then the ground shook. A low rumble, deep and powerful, reverberated beneath their feet. It wasn't just the planet shaking. It was something far worse. The buildings around them rattled, and the lights flickered as if the planet itself was being shaken to its core. The Cadets braced themselves, their instincts telling them that something huge was coming. The Eldorans gasped in fear as the tremors grew stronger. The air felt thick, charged with an unseen energy. Something was approaching, and the Cadets knew this peaceful planet was no longer safe. In the distance, the shape of a massive ship appeared in the sky, its silhouette dark against the setting sun. But this wasn't just any ship. It was enormous, its hull covered in jagged scars and weapons designed for destruction. This was no diplomatic envoy. This was an enemy force, and they were coming to Eldora. The Cadets had only one choice: defend the planet and stop the incoming threat. But first, they would need to survive the chaos that was about to unfold. The silence of a century had been shattered. And now, the Cadets would learn just how brutal the galaxy could be when Deathworlders entered the fray. This section sets up the arrival of the Deathworlder Cadets in a peaceful galaxy, and how their presence sets off a chain of events that will change everything. It introduces tension and foreshadows the challenges that lie ahead. The gathering storm. The Cadets stood in a tight formation, their expressions hardening as the massive alien ship hovered above the planet's surface. Every instinct screamed at them to prepare for battle, but there was no time to act just yet. The tension in the air was palpable. The Eldorans, once calm and composed, were now visibly panicking. Their peaceful world was on the verge of being destroyed, and the Deathworlders, trained to survive in the harshest environments, were the only ones standing between their planet and an unknown threat. The massive ship in the sky had finally lowered, its presence casting a shadow over the entire city. The Cadets were quickly ushered into a nearby underground command center, the walls lined with data terminals flashing red alerts. A high-ranking Eldoran officer met them at the door, his eyes filled with both desperation and fear. "We've never seen anything like this," he said, his voice shaking. "Our scanners detect no ships like this in our database. They're from a part of the galaxy we've never encountered." The Cadets exchanged uneasy glances, their training kicking into high gear. They had been briefed on the diversity of threats in the galaxy, but nothing could have prepared them for this: an unknown enemy that had crossed into Eldora's peaceful space. The officer quickly led them to a table, where a holographic map of the planet was displayed. Bright red dots blinked rapidly across the surface. "They've already begun landing," the officer said. "And it's not just one ship. There are hundreds. They're spreading out across our cities. We don't know what they want yet." The Cadets didn't need to be told twice. In a matter of moments, they had geared up, weapons in hand, and were ready to head out. They had been trained to handle chaos, but this was unlike any mission they had faced before. Their leader, a seasoned cadet who had been through the worst of it, turned to the rest of the group. "Stay sharp. We don't know if these people are allies or enemies, but either way, we need to secure the planet before they can do any more damage." The Cadets nodded, their faces a mask of determination. They had come to Eldora on a diplomatic mission, but it seemed the peaceful planet had a far darker destiny awaiting it. As they rushed through the underground facility, the hum of machinery and alarms rang in their ears. Outside, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the city. The streets were empty now, the once bustling markets silent, as if the entire planet had held its breath. The only sound was the low rumble of the alien ships that hovered in the skies. "We need to make our way to the city's central defense hub," the cadet leader said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "That's our best shot at coordinating a response." As they made their way to the hub, the Cadets couldn't help but feel the weight of their mission. They had trained for years to face unimaginable threats. But this was something new, something they weren't sure they were ready for. Suddenly, a bright flash lit up the sky. A bolt of energy streaked across the air and slammed into a nearby building, sending debris flying. The ground shook beneath their feet as the cadets instinctively dropped into defensive positions. They could see the source of the attack now, a group of heavily armed figures descending from the alien ship. "They've already landed," one of the cadets muttered, his eyes narrowed in focus. "And they're not wasting any time." The leader of the cadets held up his hand, signaling them to stay quiet. He slowly approached the edge of the building they were hiding behind, peering around the corner. There, standing on the planet's surface, were the invaders. Tall and humanoid, they wore dark armor that seemed to absorb the light around them. Their eyes glowed a cold, piercing blue, and the air around them seemed to hum with an unsettling energy. The leader of the cadets tightened his grip on his weapon. He knew they couldn't wait much longer. Eldora was vulnerable, and if they didn't act soon, it might be too late. "Prepare for contact," the leader ordered. "We'll have to take them down before they can do any more damage." The cadets moved swiftly, blending into the shadows of the city as they made their way toward the invaders. Each step was calculated, each movement precise. They had been trained for moments like this, moments when everything depended on their ability to move swiftly and decisively. As they neared the enemy, the cadets saw the invaders begin to spread out, their weapons glowing with an eerie energy. They were preparing for something, but what? The leader of the cadets raised his hand, signaling for the group to stop. They were close now, close enough to hear the alien soldiers speaking in a language no one could understand. But then, the leader's heart sank. The invaders were not attacking. They were setting up something that appeared to be a massive device, a weapon, a shield. The cadet leader wasn't sure, but the gravity of the situation hit him hard. "They're not just here to invade," he muttered. "They're here to change everything." The first strike. The city was eerily quiet as the cadets closed in on the alien invaders. Their senses were heightened, every small sound amplified in the oppressive silence. The once peaceful planet of Eldora, known for its lush landscapes and advanced society, had become a battlefield. The threat from the sky, the dark armored invaders, was unlike anything the cadets had trained for. The leader of the cadets, Commander Akar, surveyed the enemy through the dense smoke rising from the buildings around them. His grip on his weapon tightened as he tried to make sense of the alien device the invaders had begun to construct. It didn't look like anything the cadets had ever seen. It was massive, pulsating with an energy that seemed almost alive, and surrounded by a force field that shimmered with an unnatural glow. "We don't have time to sit here and wait," Ikar whispered, his voice low but firm. "We need to make our move now. The longer we wait, the stronger they'll get." The cadets, each one trained in the harshest environments of the galaxy, nodded in agreement. Despite the terror of facing an unknown enemy, they knew their duty. Their training had taught them how to deal with any situation, even when everything seemed stacked against them. "We'll move on your mark, Commander," said Jara, a skilled marksman, and one of Ikar's most trusted cadets. Ikar glanced around once more. The invaders had no idea they were being watched. They were too focused on assembling their weapon. The cadets used the shadows and ruined buildings as cover, moving like ghosts through the broken streets. Without another word, Akar gave the signal. In an instant, the cadets sprang into action. The first cadet, a hulking figure named Kale, broke cover and charged toward the nearest invader. His powerful legs pounded against the cracked ground as he raced forward. The invader didn't notice him until it was too late. Kale crashed into the alien with full force, knocking the soldier to the ground with a roar. Ikar and the others followed quickly, weapons raised. They fired in unison, the sound of their plasma rifles filling the air as they unleashed a barrage of energy at the aliens. The invaders barely flinched, their armor absorbing the blasts with ease. But the cadets didn't hesitate. They knew this fight wasn't going to be easy. They pushed forward, relentless, like predators closing in on their prey. Jara's sharp eyes tracked her target, an alien soldier standing just outside the shield of the enemy's weapon. Her fingers squeezed the trigger. A perfect shot. The alien fell, but no time was wasted in celebrating. The battle had only just begun. As the cadets engaged the invaders in close combat, Icar realized something disturbing. The aliens weren't trying to fight back in the way they expected. They were merely defending the device they were building, as though the device itself was more important than the battle. He turned to his second-in-command, Lyra, a brilliant strategist who was quick on her feet. Something's wrong. They're not trying to destroy us. They're protecting that weapon. It's their priority. Lyra nodded, her face grim. Whatever it is, we need to stop it. If we don't, they'll use it against the planet. We'll be facing a far greater danger than we imagined. The cadets continued to fight with everything they had, pushing the invaders back inch by inch. But the aliens seemed endless. No matter how many fell, more seemed to appear, as if they were coming from the very fabric of the planet's sky. Meanwhile, the device continued to glow brighter with each passing second. Icar knew they had to stop it before it was too late. The tension in the air was unbearable, and the cadets were running low on energy. Their weapons, though powerful, were no match for the shields surrounding the device. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the ruins, and Icar realized they were running out of time. He quickly turned to Lyra. "We need a plan. Now." She scanned the scene quickly, calculating their options. The shield. It's not invulnerable. If we can disable the generators that power it, we can bring it down. But we'll have to work fast. Icar nodded. "Jara, Cal, follow me. The rest of you, keep the pressure on the invaders. We'll take down the shield." With a burst of determination, the three cadets sprinted toward the alien device, weaving between enemy fire. Jara's quick reflexes kept them from being hit, and Kel's massive frame absorbed any blasts that came too close. They reached the base of the device, where the shield generator was located. It was heavily guarded, but they had come prepared. Kale lifted a heavy explosive charge from his pack, while Icar readied his plasma cutter to slice through the remaining defenses. "On my mark," Icar said, his voice calm but intense. "Get ready to run. This place won't hold much longer." With one final glance at the battle raging behind them, they set the charge. The countdown began, and the cadets moved quickly, retreating to a safe distance. The explosion rocked the city. A shockwave blasted through the streets, shaking the foundations of nearby buildings. The shield flickered and then collapsed. The cadets didn't hesitate. They charged forward, weapons blazing, with the device now exposed. It was their chance to finish the fight once and for all. As they reached the heart of the alien weapon, Icar could see the panic in the invaders' eyes. They had underestimated the cadets' resolve, and now they would pay the price. But even as the cadets prepared to strike the final blow, Icar felt a sinking feeling in his gut. This was just the beginning. If they had come this far, what more awaited them? The fight for Eldora had only just begun. The unexpected betrayal. As the dust settled from the explosion, the cadets stood in a tense silence. The alien weapon had been disabled, but the victory felt hollow. The invaders had been pushed back for now, but Icar couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The planet's future still hung in the balance, and he could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. The cadets regrouped, their weapons still at the ready, eyes scanning the battlefield. The aliens had retreated into the shadows, but their presence lingered like a specter in the air. Icar motioned for the team to move forward, but before they could make a move, a loud crackle came from his communicator. "This is Cadet Lyra." The voice came through, sharp and urgent. "Commander Icar, we have a situation." "Go ahead, Lyra," Icar replied, his voice tight with worry. "What's happening?" "We've received orders from the command ship." Lyra's voice faltered slightly. "They're pulling us out. They're calling the operation off." Icar froze. His heart skipped a beat. "What? That doesn't make sense. We're so close to finishing this. We can't pull back now. I know, Lyra responded, but the orders are clear. We have to leave the planet. Ikar's eyes narrowed as he looked around at the cadets. His mind raced. Something didn't add up. The command ship wouldn't pull them out in the middle of the operation unless there was something more to this mission than they were being told. Commander, Jara said, her voice filled with suspicion. I don't trust this. Why would they call us off now, when we're so close to victory? I don't know. Ikar muttered, his gaze fixed on the retreating enemy. But we're not leaving until we know exactly what's going on. Before anyone could respond, there was a sudden shift in the air, a strange, unnatural hum. Ikar's eyes shot up just in time to see a large ship descending from the sky, its massive form blocking out the sun. Is that? Kale began, but his voice trailed off. Yes, Ikar said, his voice barely above a whisper. That's the command ship. But something was wrong. The ship wasn't supposed to be here. Not this fast. The mission was only halfway complete, and now they were being called back. The sudden appearance of the command ship sent a ripple of unease through the group. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Ikar motioned for the cadets to move back into cover. They had to be cautious now. The stakes had just been raised. The command ship was meant to be their ally, but its appearance in the middle of the battle didn't sit right with him. As the ship hovered above the ground, Ikar could see movement on its lower decks. Figures began to descend, not in the usual military uniform, but in dark, heavily armored suits. The cadets' instincts screamed that these were no ordinary soldiers. Lyra's voice crackled through the comms again. Commander, I've just received new orders. The operation is over. You're to surrender and return to the ship immediately. Ikar's heart sank. He had known something was wrong, but hearing it confirmed felt like a punch to the gut. These weren't reinforcements coming to help them. These were enemies in their own ranks. We can't trust them, Jara said, her tone low and filled with disbelief. They're not here to help. They're here to finish what the aliens started. Ikar nodded grimly. We need to get out of here now. No matter what happens, we don't trust anyone from that ship. We're on our own. As the dark figures descended, the cadets knew that their fight was far from over. The real battle had just begun. But Ikar wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The galaxy might have underestimated the Deathworlder cadets, but they were about to learn a hard lesson. The mission wasn't over until they said it was. We move out, Ikar ordered, his voice firm. We'll find out what's really going on. They didn't wait to see who else might be joining the command ship. The cadets moved swiftly, ducking behind cover and moving toward a different part of the battlefield. They had to stay one step ahead of whatever betrayal was about to unfold. But as they moved, Ikar couldn't help but wonder. If the command ship was part of the enemy's plot, who could they trust? The lines between friend and foe had blurred, and the danger was growing with each passing moment. The cadets knew they had to act fast before they were trapped. But as they navigated the war-torn streets of Eldora, they began to realize something terrifying. There were no safe places left. The enemy had already infiltrated their ranks, and the truth was even more dangerous than they had imagined. As the cadets raced toward an uncertain future, Ikar couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The heart of the betrayal. The darkened skies above Eldora were an ominous backdrop as Ikar and his cadets moved through the war-torn streets, trying to distance themselves from the command ship. Every step felt heavier, as though the weight of the unknown was pressing down on their shoulders. They were no longer just fighting the enemy outside. Now they had to fight the ones who should have been on their side. I still can't believe it, Jara whispered, her voice tight with anger. The command ship, our supposed allies, are the ones who gave up on this mission. We've been betrayed. Ikar didn't answer right away. His mind was working furiously, piecing together fragments of information. Why would they betray their own soldiers? Was it about something larger than this battle? The confusion gnawed at him, but the urgency of the situation kept him moving forward. "Do you think they knew we would win?" Cale asked, his voice shaky with disbelief. "What if they never planned for us to succeed?" "That's exactly what I think," Icar replied grimly, turning to face the team. "I think they were counting on our failure from the start. Something bigger is at play here, and we're caught in the middle of it." The cadets had barely made it to the outskirts of the city when they heard a noise behind them, a low hum growing louder. Before they could react, a sharp, high-pitched alarm blared through the comm system. "Commander, this is Lyra," came the voice over the line, but there was something different about it. Her voice was strained, almost fearful. "There's been an attack on the command ship. We're being overrun. They've sent—" The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. Icar's heart dropped. He motioned for the team to stop. They had to figure out what had happened. Had Lyra and the others been compromised? Were they under attack, or was this part of the betrayal? "Icar, what do we do now?" Cale asked, his voice full of uncertainty. "Right now, we stay together," Icar replied, his tone firm. "We find out what happened to the command ship, and we figure out who's still on our side." The cadets moved cautiously through the streets, always staying in the shadows, never making a sound. Icar's thoughts raced. He couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was unfolding. The entire operation had been a mess, and now they were caught in the middle of a conspiracy that threatened not just their lives, but the future of the galaxy itself. As they neared the outskirts of the city, they saw it, the command ship, now on fire. Smoke billowed from its lower hull as explosions rocked the area. The cadets' hearts sank as they watched the ship fall apart, pieces of metal scattering into the air like debris. "What the hell happened?" Jara murmured, her voice filled with disbelief. "I don't know," Icar said, his eyes narrowing. "But I have a feeling we're about to find out." The team moved closer, keeping their distance from the wreckage. The sight of the burning ship only fueled the suspicion in their hearts. Something was very wrong. The cadets needed answers. Suddenly, they heard footsteps behind them, slow and deliberate. Icar's hand instinctively went to his weapon, but he stopped when he recognized the figure emerging from the smoke. It was Lyra. She appeared unscathed, but her expression was grim, her eyes wide with fear. "Lyra," Icar called, rushing toward her. "What happened? What's going on?" Lyra looked around nervously, her face pale. "It's a trap," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They knew we were going to succeed. The mission wasn't about defeating the aliens. It was about us. The command ship, it wasn't here to help us. Icar, it was here to control us." Icar's blood ran cold. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, and the truth was worse than anything he had imagined. The entire mission had been a setup, a way to manipulate them, to make them part of a bigger scheme. "I don't understand," Cale said, his voice cracking. "Why? Why would they do this?" Lyra shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "They've been working with the aliens. This was all a distraction, a way to keep us out of the way while they made their real moves. The aliens aren't the ones we need to worry about anymore. It's our own people." Icar's mind reeled. The betrayal ran deeper than he had ever imagined. They weren't just fighting an enemy from another world. They were fighting their own comrades, their own command, who had sold them out for reasons they couldn't yet understand. "We need to stop them," Icar said, his voice filled with resolve. "We need to stop the ones behind this, no matter what it takes." The cadets knew that their survival depended on one thing. They had to stay united and fight back against the forces that were working to destroy everything they had fought for. But the more they uncovered, the more they realized that their battle was only just beginning. They were no longer just cadets. They were the last line of defense in a galactic conspiracy that threatened to unravel everything. The war had just begun, and the stakes had never been higher. The rise of the Deathworlders. The silence after Lyra's revelation felt like an eternity. Ikar stood there, his mind struggling to process the weight of her words. The idea that their own command had been complicit in the betrayal shook him to the core. It wasn't just a military operation gone wrong. It was a deliberate plan to sacrifice them, to set them up as pawns in a game much bigger than any of them had imagined. He turned to the cadets, their faces etched with confusion and fear. But there was something else there now. Something darker, something more dangerous. The realization that they had been used, manipulated, burned within them like an unquenchable fire. "We've been lied to. All of us," Ikar said, his voice hard. "But this ends now. We're not going to let them control us any longer. We fight back, and we fight hard." The cadets exchanged looks, their previous uncertainty fading into a fierce determination. They had been trained for combat, but never like this. This wasn't just about military strategy or survival. This was about survival in the truest sense, fighting for their freedom, fighting for the truth, and fighting for their very lives. Lyra nodded, her face grim. "We need to move fast. We've lost the advantage. They're regrouping, and we're running out of time." "Then we make our own advantage," Ikar replied. "We find out who's pulling the strings, and we cut them off." With that, the group began to make their way toward a hidden base, one that Ikar had once used for training exercises, but had long been abandoned. It was a perfect location to regroup and plan their next move. The mission had changed completely, but their goal remained the same: to survive, and above all, to win. As they moved through the shadows of the ravaged city, every noise seemed amplified. The wind howled through the broken streets, carrying with it the scent of smoke and burning debris. The once thriving world was now a war zone, and the cadets were no longer soldiers. They were survivors. Ikar couldn't shake the feeling that the eyes of the galaxy were on them, watching their every move. The betrayal ran deep, and as much as it disgusted him, he knew that they couldn't let it break them. The strength they had as Deathworlders was no longer just in their training or their combat skills. It was in their resilience, in their ability to adapt, to survive in the face of overwhelming odds. "Ikar," Jara called quietly, breaking him from his thoughts. "What if there's no one left to trust? What if everyone we know is just part of this plan?" Ikar paused, his gaze hardening. "We trust each other. That's all we need." But even as he said the words, doubt crept in. Who could they trust now? The command ship was gone, their leaders were compromised, and their very existence was now part of a larger conspiracy. But the one thing they still had was their bond, the unspoken unity that had brought them together in the first place. "Let's keep moving," Ikar urged, shaking off the moment of hesitation. "We can't waste time." They reached the base in the dead of night, the shadows of the ruins providing them with cover. The door was still functional, but it had been long abandoned. As they entered the base, the familiar surroundings gave them a sense of comfort, an illusion of safety. It wouldn't last long. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. The old command center hummed to life as they powered up the system, the screens flickering in front of them. Ikar sat down at the main terminal and began to search for any communications or intelligence that might give them answers. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but it was their best shot. As he worked, Lyra turned to the others. "We need to keep the perimeter secure. No one gets in or out without our say." Kale, his voice still filled with disbelief, asked, "What happens if the command comes for us?" "We make sure they don't," Ikar said firmly, his fingers flying over the keys. "We turn the tables. We expose the truth, and we do it before they have a chance to react." The hours stretched on as Ikar dug deeper into the system. His mind raced, piecing together what little he knew about the command ship's operations and the mysterious forces working behind the scenes. But then, just as he thought he might be getting closer, the screens flickered again. A new message appeared, its contents almost too horrifying to comprehend. It was a direct transmission from the command ship, a distress signal, but it was different. It was coded, encrypted, and the language was unlike anything he'd seen before. It was clear now. Whoever was behind this betrayal was no ordinary foe. It wasn't just a rogue faction or a misguided ally. They were up against something far more dangerous. "What the hell is this?" Icare muttered under his breath. Lyra stepped forward, her face pale as she read the message over his shoulder. "This is impossible." Icare's eyes narrowed as he studied the code. There was no way they could take on an enemy with this level of organization. They weren't just fighting a war anymore. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy itself. "We need to act fast," Icare said, determination in his voice. "It's not just about us anymore. It's about everyone. We expose this. Now, no more waiting." The cadets exchanged glances, realizing that their fight had only just begun. The stakes had risen higher than any of them could have imagined, and the enemy they faced was far beyond their training. But if anyone could rise to the challenge, it was them. They were Deathworlders, born to survive, born to fight, and they would not back down. Not now, not ever. As Icare turned back to the screen, his resolve hardened. The galaxy had no idea what was coming for it, and neither did the ones who thought they could control the Deathworlders. They were about to find out. The last stand. The base was silent, save for the faint hum of the outdated equipment and the distant echoes of the cadets preparing for what was to come. Icare stood at the command console, his mind racing as he processed the encrypted message from the command ship. Every second felt like an eternity. They were running out of time. "Do you think we can actually do this?" Jara's voice was quiet, filled with uncertainty as she approached him. Icare didn't turn from the screen. He didn't need to. The answer had been clear to him since the first moment he realized the scale of the conspiracy. "We have to," he said, his voice steady but firm. "There's no going back now. We expose them, or we lose everything." The weight of his words settled heavily over the group. They had come so far, endured so much, but now they stood on the edge of a precipice. What was about to happen would change the course of history, or end it. "Everyone, gather up," Icare called out, his tone commanding. "It's time. We've learned what we need to know. Now we hit them where it hurts." The cadets quickly assembled in the center of the base. Their faces were a mix of fear, anger, and determination. They had seen countless battles, faced death more times than they cared to remember. But this was different. This wasn't a mission to destroy an enemy. This was a mission to destroy a lie that had been woven so deeply into the fabric of the galaxy's power structure that it would take everything they had to unravel it. Lyra, always the pragmatic one, spoke up. "We don't have the numbers. The resources are limited. But we got one thing the enemy doesn't: the element of surprise." "Exactly," Icare replied. "They think they have control, but they don't. Not over us." Kale, who had been silent for much of the journey, finally spoke up. "We'll hit them fast, hit them hard, and make sure they never see it coming." The plan was simple but dangerous. They would use the base's outdated communication system to send a signal, an anonymous broadcast that would leak the truth to every corner of the galaxy. It would expose the conspiracy, the betrayal, the lies. But getting the signal out wasn't going to be easy. They had to disable security systems, fight their way through hostile forces, and in the end, hope that the galaxy's leaders would listen. "We don't have much time," Icare said, turning to the team. "Let's move out." The cadets slipped into the shadows of the base, their footsteps light but purposeful. They were no longer just soldiers. They were rebels, fighting for the truth. Every corner they turned, every hallway they crossed, seemed to pulse with the danger of what they were about to do. The base, once a symbol of power and order, now felt like a trap waiting to spring. As they reached the control room, Icare gave a signal to the others. He slid into the chair, his fingers hovering over the keys. The console flickered, showing the familiar interface of the old communication system. It was archaic, outdated, but it would work. He could send the broadcast. He could expose the truth. But as he began to type, something caught his eye. A new message incoming. It was from the command ship, the very one that had set them up. His heart pounded as he opened the transmission. A familiar voice filled the room, sending a chill down his spine. "Icar, I see you've made it this far, but do you really think you can change anything?" The voice was cold, mocking. It belonged to General Rake, the very man who had orchestrated their downfall. "You think you can beat us? You think you can expose us? You're just pawns in a much larger game," Rake continued. "You're nothing but tools, and the sooner you accept that, the better." Icar's hand tightened around the console, his knuckles white with rage. "You're wrong," he muttered under his breath. "We're not pawns. We're Deathworlders, and we don't play by your rules." The broadcast system was ready. The truth was within his grasp. But Rake's message hung in the air, a reminder of the immense power they were up against. It was clear now that this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future of the galaxy. "Are you ready?" Icar asked, his voice low but fierce. Lyra nodded, determination in her eyes. "Let's finish this." Icar pressed the button. The broadcast began. The screen flashed as the transmission was sent out, the encrypted message breaking apart, exposing the conspiracy to the galaxy. It was happening. The truth was out there, and there was no turning back now. But as the message spread across the galaxy, chaos erupted. The enemy's forces began to mobilize. They were coming for them, and they were coming fast. The cadets knew they had no more time to waste. The fight was just beginning. Icar turned to his team, his eyes burning with resolve. "We've made our move. Now we fight. For the truth. For freedom. For the galaxy." With that, they rushed out of the control room, prepared to face whatever came next. The Deathworlders had been silent for too long. Now, they would be heard. And nothing would ever be the same again.